Special Forces operators survive in the worst conditions imaginable, dropped into hostile territory with minimal equipment, operating behind enemy lines where discovery means death, evading capture for days or weeks, with entire militaries hunting them, gathering intelligence while blending into populations that would kill them if their cover failed. They do this not because they have the best gear, not because they stockpiled the most supplies, not because they trained at the range more than anyone else. They survive because they learned 3 skills that have nothing to do with equipment and everything to do with capability. Skills that keep you alive when you have nothing, when your gear is gone, when your cash is compromised, when your plan failed, and you're operating on pure capability with no safety net. Skills that work in worst-case scenarios because they're designed for worst-case scenarios. The prepper community ignores these skills almost completely. They focus on what they can buy: gear lists, stockpile inventories, weapons and ammunition, the latest tactical equipment. They spend thousands on things while ignoring the capabilities that actually determine who lives and who dies when everything goes wrong. Special Forces training isn't about gear, it's about the operator, building capabilities that persist regardless of circumstances, creating humans who can survive and operate in any environment with any level of resources. The gear is secondary, the human is primary. Preppers have this backward. They think gear makes them capable. Special Forces knows capability makes gear effective, and capability without gear still works, while gear without capability fails. 3 specific skills separate Special Forces survival training from prepper culture. 3 capabilities that SF operators drill relentlessly that preppers either don't know exist or dismiss as military stuff that doesn't apply to civilians. Except it does apply. It applies more to collapse survival than almost anything else preppers train for, because collapse scenarios are hostile territory. You're operating in an environment that wants you dead. You need these skills. You don't have them, and that gap might be what kills you. Here are the 3 survival skills Special Forces learn that preppers always ignore: what they are, why they matter, and why you need to start learning them immediately. Skill 1: escape and evasion. Moving through hostile territory undetected. Preppers train for defense. They fortify homes. They practice shooting. They prepare to fight off threats that come to them. Special Forces trains for evasion. They practice not being where threats are looking, not fighting unless there's no alternative, surviving through invisibility and movement, not firepower and fortification. Escape and evasion, called E&E, is an entire skill set dedicated to moving through hostile territory while avoiding capture or detection. This is what downed pilots do when they crash in enemy territory, what operators do when missions go wrong and they're separated from their team, what people do when being hunted and they need to reach safety. In collapse scenarios, escape and evasion is moving through gang territory to reach a cache, evacuating a city when checkpoints control roads, relocating when your current position becomes untenable, avoiding patrols, checkpoints, searchers, and predators, while covering ground to reach safety. Preppers prepare to defend in place. They don't prepare to move through hostile territory because they assume they'll never have to. This assumption is dangerous. Circumstances change. What was safe becomes unsafe. What was defensible becomes indefensible. You need to move. And movement through hostile territory requires skills preppers don't have. The core E&E skills: route selection and terrain exploitation. Special Forces operators don't take direct routes. They use terrain that provides concealment and limits enemy observation. They move through areas that are difficult for vehicles or patrols to access. They use natural features, ravines, dense vegetation, water obstacles, as barriers between themselves and pursuers. Preppers think about routes as roads versus back roads. Special Forces thinks about routes as terrain types that favor evasion versus terrain types that favor detection. The difference is fundamental. You're not picking roads. You're picking terrain features that make you hard to find. Low ground is often better than high ground for evasion. You're below lines of sight. You're in vegetation. You're where people don't naturally look. High ground gives you visibility but makes you visible. Special Forces training emphasizes using terrain to remain unseen, not to see better. Movement techniques that minimize detection. How you move matters as much as where you move. Fast movement in open areas attracts attention. Slow, deliberate movement using cover and concealment keeps you invisible. Special Forces practices Ranger Pace, a method of covering ground quickly during low visibility windows and slowly through high exposure areas. The pace varies based on terrain and threat. You're not maintaining steady speed. You're adapting movement to conditions constantly. Silhouetting is the amateur mistake, moving along ridgelines or against the sky. Special Forces stays below horizons, moves through vegetation, avoids creating distinctive shapes against backgrounds. The trained operator is never silhouetted, ever. Sound discipline is trained obsessively. How you place your feet, how you control your gear so it doesn't rattle or scrape, how you breathe when you're exhausted but need to stay silent. Every movement is noise management. Preppers walk through the woods like they're hiking. Special Forces glides through without leaving audible trace. Counter-tracking and sign awareness. You're leaving sign, footprints, broken vegetation, disturbed ground, scent. Trackers can follow this. E&E training includes awareness of the sign you create and methods to minimize or disguise it. Walking on hard surfaces when possible, choosing routes through water or on rock that don't hold tracks, backtracking and switching directions to confuse trailing, moving during rain or wind that obscures sign. These techniques slow you down but reduce the trail you leave. Preppers think about tactical movement in terms of having guns ready. Special Forces thinks about tactical movement as leaving no evidence you were there. Different mindset, different outcome. Urban evasion techniques. Cities are different terrain than wilderness. E&E in urban environments uses buildings, crowds, vehicles, and infrastructure for concealment. Special Forces trains for both wilderness and urban evasion because missions happen in both. Urban evasion includes blending with populations, using structures for concealment, moving through areas where observation is limited, and avoiding checkpoints or patrol patterns. This is directly applicable to collapse scenarios in populated areas, but preppers rarely train for it because they're focused on rural retreat scenarios, hide site selection, and establishment. Sometimes you can't keep moving. You need to hole up. E&E training includes selecting and establishing hide sites that remain undetected even during thorough searches. The characteristics of good hide sites? They're uncomfortable. If it's comfortable, it's obvious. They have limited approaches that you can observe. They provide concealment from multiple angles. They're in areas people don't naturally search, thick vegetation, unpleasant terrain, places that require effort to access. Preppers think of hiding as going to a room and closing the door. Special Forces thinks of hiding as becoming invisible in an environment where people are actively searching for you. The first works in friendly territory. The second works when you're being hunted. The mindset shift E&E requires. E&E isn't about confrontation. You're avoiding contact entirely. Every encounter you avoid is a fight you didn't have to win, ammunition you didn't have to spend, injury you didn't risk. The goal is reaching destination without anyone knowing you were there. Preppers are trained to think about capability projection. I can defend this. I can win that fight. Special Forces is trained to think about capability conservation. Don't fight unless you must. Survive through intelligence and evasion, not through firepower. This mindset is hard for preppers to adopt because it feels like cowardice. It's not. It's professional survival thinking. The operator who reaches extraction without firing a shot succeeded. The operator who fought their way out survived but used resources, created noise, and alerted enemies. Both lived, but one accomplished the mission optimally. Why preppers ignore E&E? E&E isn't gear-based. You can't buy evasion capability. You develop it through practice. Preppers gravitate toward purchasable solutions. Evasion is a skill that requires no equipment and significant training, exactly backward from prepper culture. E&E assumes mobility. Most prepper planning assumes static defense. I'll defend my home retreat. Special Forces assumes you might need to move through hostile territory at any time. Movement capability versus fixed position defense represents fundamentally different survival philosophies. E&E training is physically and mentally demanding. Actually practicing evasion means spending hours moving through terrain while maintaining discipline. It's not fun, it's not comfortable, it's hard work. Preppers prefer range time or gear testing, activities that feel productive and are more enjoyable. But collapse scenarios are exactly the environments where E&E skills become critical. Territory you need to cross is controlled by hostile groups. Checkpoints block routes, patrols cover areas. You need to move unseen through an environment that's actively hostile. If you don't have E&E skills, you don't make it. Skill 2. Human intelligence gathering. Reading people and extracting information. Special Forces operators gather intelligence constantly, not through fancy equipment, through talking to people, reading body language, asking the right questions, building rapport, extracting information from sources who don't realize they're providing it. This is human intelligence. It's one of the most valuable skills operators have, and it's completely ignored by prepper culture. Preppers think about information gathering as monitoring ham radio or reading news. Special Forces thinks about information gathering as interacting with humans and extracting intelligence through conversation and observation. The difference is critical because in collapse scenarios, the most valuable intelligence isn't broadcast. It's known by people in the area. Core human skills: elicitation, extracting information without direct questioning. You don't ask, "Where are the gangs operating?" That's obvious intelligence gathering. You elicit the same information through conversation that seems casual. "How's the neighborhood been? I heard things got rough a few blocks over." The person responds with their perspective. You're not interrogating. You're having a conversation, but you're steering it toward intelligence targets while making it feel natural. Special Forces trains elicitation extensively. How to guide conversations. How to ask questions that prompt information without revealing your intelligence interest. How to make people want to tell you things because they feel heard and respected. Preppers don't learn this. When they need information, they ask directly, "Are there gangs around here?" This marks them as outsiders gathering intelligence, which creates suspicion and shuts down information flow. The direct approach fails. The elicitation approach succeeds. Reading body language and baseline behavior. People lie with words. Their bodies often tell truth. Special Forces operators are trained in reading nonverbal communication to assess honesty, stress, deception, and intent. Baseline establishment is the foundation. You observe how someone behaves normally. Then you watch for deviations from baseline when specific topics are discussed. The shift indicates something about that topic matters: stress, deception, strong emotion. This guides what you probe further. Micro-expressions reveal genuine emotion before conscious control masks it. Hand positioning indicates comfort or threat. Eye contact patterns show confidence or deception. Proxemics, how someone positions themselves relative to you, reveals their comfort level and intentions. This isn't mind reading, it's pattern recognition based on trained observation. Special Forces practices this constantly. Preppers don't even know it's a learnable skill. They evaluate people based on gut feeling, which is untrained intuition, sometimes right, often wrong. Rapport building and social engineering. People share information with people they like and trust. Special Forces operators are trained to build rapport quickly, even with people from different cultures who might be hostile. Mirroring body language and speech patterns. Finding common ground. Demonstrating respect for local customs. Using humor appropriately. These techniques create psychological connection that enables information sharing. This isn't manipulation for selfish gain. It's survival skill. In hostile territory, the locals have information you need. Their cooperation can mean the difference between living and dying. Building rapport is how you gain that cooperation. Preppers are often terrible at this. They're defensive, suspicious, unwilling to engage with people they don't know. This isolates them from information networks and marks them as outsiders. The Special Forces operator blends in, builds relationships, and gains access to the intelligence that determines operational success. Information validation and source assessment. Not all information is accurate. Sources have biases, limited knowledge, or reasons to deceive. Special Forces trains methods for validating information across multiple sources and assessing source reliability. Triangulation means getting the same information from multiple independent sources. If 3 people who don't know each other tell you similar things, it's probably accurate. If one person tells you something nobody else confirms, it's suspect. Source motivation assessment asks why this person is sharing this information. What do they gain? What might they be hiding? Understanding motivation helps determine reliability. Special Forces operators maintain information networks, relationships with multiple sources that can be cross-referenced. Preppers typically interact with limited social circles and don't systematically build information networks across diverse sources. Pattern recognition and analysis. Intelligence gathering isn't just collecting information. It's analyzing patterns to understand what's happening and predict what will happen. You're noticing which areas have increased traffic, which groups are expanding territory, which resources are becoming scarce, which alliances are forming. These patterns tell stories about the operating environment that direct information requests wouldn't reveal. Special Forces operators are trained to notice patterns across multiple information streams and synthesize them into actionable intelligence. This isn't instinct, it's trained analysis skill. Preppers collect information, but often lack the analytical framework to synthesize it into usable intelligence. Why this matters in collapse. Information determines decisions. Where to scavenge. Which routes are safe. Which groups are hostile. Which areas have resources. All of this information exists in human knowledge before it's common knowledge. The person who gathers intelligence early makes better decisions before everyone else figures out the same information. Humant also prevents fatal mistakes. You're about to trade with a group. Through conversation and observation, you assess their planning to rob you. You walk away. No confrontation. No loss. You survived through information. Or you're considering joining a community. Through elicitation and rapport building, you learn the leadership is unstable and the group is fracturing. You don't join. You avoided becoming trapped in a failing organization. Intelligence saved you. Why preppers ignore Humant? It's socially focused. Preppers are often introverted or antisocial by nature. That's part of why they're preppers. Social skills feel uncomfortable, but comfort doesn't determine effectiveness. Humant works regardless of your personality type, but you must train it. It requires sustained human interaction. You can't gather intelligence without talking to people. Preppers who've embraced lone wolf mentality resist this. They see other humans as threats, not information sources. This blinds them to one of their most valuable intelligence assets. It's not gear-based. You can't buy human capability. You can take courses or read books, but ultimately, it's practice skill developed through actual human interaction. This doesn't fit prepper culture that emphasizes stockpiling and equipment. But in Collapse, the operator who can gather intelligence through human interaction knows what's happening, while the isolated prepper is making decisions blind. Information is advantage. Human is how you get information that matters. Skill 3. Stress inoculation and psychological resilience. Performing under pressure. Special Forces spends enormous resources on psychological conditioning, not physical training, mental training. Building operators who can think clearly and perform effectively when they're terrified, exhausted, injured, and under maximum stress. This is stress inoculation. Deliberate exposure to high-stress conditions that builds psychological resilience. The trained operator doesn't panic under pressure because they've been under worse pressure in training hundreds of times. The response is conditioned. Preppers largely ignore psychological preparation. They train physical skills and accumulate gear. They don't systematically train their minds to handle extreme stress. When crisis hits, they're psychologically unprepared for the intensity of real collapse situations. Core psychological resilience skills. Stress exposure training. Special Forces deliberately creates high-stress training environments. Sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, simulated capture and interrogation, sudden unexpected emergencies, all designed to put operators under psychological pressure while requiring them to continue performing. The point isn't to torture people, it's to habituate them to stress. First exposure to extreme stress causes panic and cognitive shutdown. 20th exposure causes alert focus and continued performance. The psychological response changes through repeated exposure. Preppers don't train this way. Their range time is controlled and comfortable. Their camping trips are recreational. They've never deliberately pushed themselves into situations where they're terrified and exhausted but must keep functioning. When real crisis creates those conditions, they're experiencing it for the first time. Psychological collapse is likely. The training method is progressive overload. Start with manageable stress. Build tolerance. Increase stress level. Build more tolerance. Over time, your baseline stress tolerance increases dramatically. What would have broken you initially becomes merely uncomfortable later. This can be trained individually. Deliberate, uncomfortable situations, cold exposure, extended fasting, physical challenges beyond comfortable limits, sleep restriction, social stress. Any situation that pushes you psychologically while requiring continued performance builds resilience. Cognitive control under pressure. When stressed, the brain defaults to fight or flight responses. Higher cognitive functions degrade. Decision-making becomes impaired. Special Forces trains methods to maintain cognitive control when the brain wants to panic. Tactical breathing is the foundation. Box breathing. 4 counts in, hold 4. 4 counts out, hold 4. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reducing physiological stress response. It sounds simple. It's extraordinarily effective. Special Forces drills it until it's automatic under stress. Cognitive override techniques, mental exercises that force rational thinking when emotions are overwhelming. Counting in patterns, reciting memorized information, forcing yourself through decision-making processes even when you want to freeze or panic. Self-talk discipline. How you talk to yourself under stress determines performance. Negative self-talk creates cascading failure. Positive, directive self-talk maintains function. Breathe, assess, act. Simple, repeated, effective. Special Forces trains this explicitly. Preppers don't typically practice cognitive control techniques. They assume they'll handle it when the time comes. They won't. Cognitive collapse under extreme stress is the default human response. Only training overrides it. Compartmentalization and emotional processing. In operational environments, terrible things happen. People die. Missions fail. You're injured. You're afraid. You can't process these emotions immediately because immediate processing would impair operational effectiveness. Special Forces trains compartmentalization, the ability to temporarily set aside emotional processing to maintain performance, then process emotions later in safe environments. This isn't suppression, it's delayed processing. Acknowledge emotion, I'm afraid. Box it temporarily, I'll deal with that later. Focus on present. Right now, I need to move to that position. This mental discipline maintains effectiveness despite emotional impact. After immediate danger passes, you do process. You acknowledge fear, grief, anger, whatever arose. You work through it. The difference is timing. During crisis, you delay processing, not deny it. This prevents emotional collapse during critical moments. Preppers often confuse emotional control with emotional suppression. They think being tough means not feeling fear. Special Forces knows everyone feels fear. The trained operator just doesn't let fear control their actions. Different concept, different outcome, decision-making under uncertainty. Collapse scenarios are information-poor environments. You never have perfect information. You must decide and act based on incomplete data while under stress. This is trained skill. Special Forces uses decision-making frameworks that work under pressure. OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. Simple enough to remember under stress. Comprehensive enough to guide decisions. Pattern matching from scenarios. You've trained dozens or hundreds of scenarios. Current situation resembles previous training. Pattern match and apply learned responses. This creates faster, better decisions under pressure because you're not figuring things out from scratch. Accepting uncertainty explicitly. You won't know if this is the right decision. You decide anyway based on best available information. Analysis paralysis kills. Imperfect action beats perfect inaction. Special Forces drills rapid decision-making under uncertainty until it's comfortable. Preppers often freeze when faced with decisions under stress. They want more information. They want to be certain. They want to analyze options completely. By the time they decide, the situation has evolved and their decision is obsolete. Training creates comfort with uncertainty that enables rapid decision-making. Group cohesion under stress. Most Special Forces operations are team-based. The team must remain functional when individuals are under maximum stress. This requires trained psychological cohesion that prevents group collapse when things go wrong. Trust is built through shared hardship. Teams that train together under stress trust each other under real stress. They know their teammates' capabilities from experience, not assumption. Communication discipline under stress. Clear, concise, controlled communication even when everyone's terrified. This maintains coordination and prevents group panic. Leadership and followership fluidity. The designated leader might be incapacitated. Another team member steps up. This works because everyone's trained leadership principles and accepts leadership transitions naturally. Hierarchy is functional, not rigid. For preppers operating in groups, this training is critical. Your family or survival group will face extreme stress. Without trained cohesion, groups fracture when pressure peaks. With trained cohesion, groups function better under stress than individuals do. Why psychological resilience matters most. Physical capability and supplies matter. But psychological collapse makes all other preparation worthless. The person who panics and freezes dies regardless of their gear. The person who maintains cognitive function and continues operating survives. Collapse is prolonged stress. Not one crisis, but sustained crisis over weeks, months, years. Psychological resilience determines whether you maintain functionality over that duration or deteriorate into dysfunction. Most death and collapse scenarios isn't from violence or starvation immediately. It's from accumulated stress causing decision-making failure that creates cascading mistakes that eventually kill you. Psychological resilience prevents this cascade. Why preppers ignore psychological training? It's invisible. You can't see psychological resilience. You can see gear and stockpiles. Preppers focus on visible preparation markers that they can inventory and photograph. Mental preparation doesn't show up in pictures of supply closets. It's uncomfortable. Stress inoculation training requires deliberately making yourself miserable. This isn't fun. Preppers want preparation to feel good. Successful range days, organized stockpiles, comfortable camping. Psychological training is deliberately unpleasant. It requires expertise or deliberate programming. You can buy gear. You can't buy psychological resilience. You must train it systematically over time. Most preppers lack the knowledge to design effective psychological conditioning programs, and professional training is expensive and rare. But the return on investment is extraordinary. Psychological preparation multiplies the effectiveness of all other preparation. The psychologically prepared person with limited gear outperforms the psychologically fragile person with perfect gear consistently. The common thread: capability over equipment. All three skills share a fundamental characteristic: they're human capabilities, not equipment-based advantages. Escape and evasion is movement and discipline. Human is social skill and observation. Psychological resilience is mental conditioning. None require gear. All require training. This is the core difference between Special Forces preparation and prepper preparation. Special Forces builds capable humans who can operate in any environment with any equipment level. Preppers build stockpiles and hope their gear compensates for capability gaps. When gear is lost, captured, or depleted, the operator still has capabilities. The prepper has nothing. This is why Special Forces methodologies emphasize capability development over equipment accumulation. Why preppers can't ignore these skills. Collapse scenarios are exactly the environments these skills were designed for. Operating in hostile territory with limited resources while under extreme stress. That's not just military operations. That's collapse survival. You will need to move through dangerous areas. E&E skills determine whether you make it. You will need information about what's happening around you. Human determines what you know and what you miss. You will face terrifying, exhausting situations. Psychological resilience determines whether you maintain function or collapse. These aren't optional nice-to-have skills. They're core survival capabilities that separate people who make it from people who don't. How to start learning. These skills, E&E training. Start with land navigation without GPS. Learn to move through terrain using natural features. Practice moving silently through woods. Work on observation without being observed. Take tracking courses to understand the sign you leave. Study urban evasion. Practice everything. Human training. Read books on human intelligence gathering, elicitation, and social engineering. Study body language and micro-expressions. Practice conversation techniques that extract information. Work on rapport building with strangers. Join groups to practice social intelligence in semi-structured environments. Psychological resilience. Design progressive stress exposure. Cold showers build early discomfort tolerance. Extended fasting introduces physical and mental stress. Sleep deprivation in safe environments. Physical challenges beyond comfort zones. Always with safe boundaries, but pushing psychological limits. Professional training exists. Survival schools teach E&E. Interview and interrogation courses teach human fundamentals. Executive protection and high-stress occupations provide psychological conditioning. These cost money, but provide structured learning from experienced instructors. Self-directed learning is also viable. The information exists in books, videos, and courses. The challenge is applying it systematically rather than consuming passively. You must practice, not just study. The bottom line. Special Forces operators learn 3 survival skills that preppers almost universally ignore: escape and evasion, human intelligence gathering, and psychological resilience under stress. These skills are fundamental to survival in hostile environments. Collapse scenarios are hostile environments. Preppers focus on gear and supplies while ignoring capability development. This is backward. Gear amplifies capability but doesn't replace it. Without capability, gear is wasted. With capability, minimal gear is sufficient. The 3 skills Special Forces emphasizes aren't military-specific. They're universal survival capabilities that work for anyone in any crisis. Moving unseen through dangerous territory, gathering information through human interaction, maintaining psychological function under extreme stress. These determine survival more than any equipment you own. Learning these skills requires time, effort, and discomfort. They're not quick purchase solutions. They're long-term capability investments that pay returns forever. Once learned, they persist. Nobody can take them from you. They work with zero equipment. They improve with practice. The prepper with $50,000 in gear and zero training in these skills is less prepared than the person with $5,000 in gear and mastery of E&E, human, and psychological resilience. The capable human survives scenarios the gear-dependent person doesn't. Special Forces knows this. It's why their training emphasizes capability over equipment. It's why operators can be dropped anywhere with minimal supplies and still operate effectively. The human is the weapon system. Everything else is tools for that system to use. Preppers need to learn this lesson. Stop buying more gear. Start building more capability. Train escape and evasion so you can move through hostile territory. Train human intelligence gathering so you know what's happening. Train psychological resilience so you function when everything's falling apart. These aren't optional skills for specialized operators. They're fundamental survival skills for anyone who might face collapse scenarios, which is everyone, eventually. Learn them now while you have time, resources, and safe environments to practice, because learning them during the collapse is too late. By then, the mistakes from not having them have already killed you. Be capable, not just equipped. Capability is what survives.